The first warning sign wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, disguised as progress. My wife, Vanessa Carter, had always been driven. That was one of the things that pulled me toward her in the beginning. While I built my career through steady routines and discipline, Vanessa chased momentum. She wanted acceleration, bigger rooms, bigger conversations, bigger people. I was a senior operations analyst for a logistics firm in Seattle. Early mornings, structured days, predictable outcomes. Vanessa worked in startup consulting, where nothing stayed still for long. We used to balance each other. Or at least, that's what I believed. Somewhere along the way, balance turned into distance. She started coming home later. Not every night, just enough to feel intentional. Her phone was always on silent now, face down on tables. When I asked how her day went, her answers sounded polished, like press releases. Efficient. Empty. Still, I didn't accuse her of anything. I'm not that kind of man. I believe in evidence, not emotion. What I didn't notice was how often one name appeared in her stories. Victor Hale, an investor, a connector, someone who opened doors. According to Vanessa, Victor was the reason her career was finally taking off. He believed in her vision. He wanted to mentor her. He liked how she thought. She said all of this while standing at the kitchen counter, removing her earrings, never quite looking at me. Our routines fractured slowly. I still woke at 5:30, still ran along the waterfront, still brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Vanessa used to join me on weekends. Then weekends became catch-up days. Then they disappeared entirely. At night, she lay beside me, scrolling through messages she said were work-related. I stopped asking to see them the first time she sighed like I disappointed her. The emotional shift hurt more than suspicion ever could. One evening, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in her blazer pocket. Rooftop bar. Downtown. 2 drinks. Midweek. I didn't confront her. I saved it. That's the thing about trust. It doesn't always break loudly. Sometimes it erodes through patterns you can't unsee once they form. A few days later, Vanessa told me she had an important meeting coming up. She framed it carefully. Strategic. Career-defining. Casual enough to sound harmless. Serious enough to discourage questions. She said Victor wanted to discuss long-term funding opportunities. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere professional. Her tone was calm, reassuring, almost tender. She even smiled when she told me not to worry. Said I'd been stressed lately. Said I needed to believe in her. I listened. I nodded. I kissed her forehead. Then I did something she didn't expect. I let her go without resistance. No argument. No suspicion. No tension. Just silence. That silence followed me for the rest of the night. I sat alone at the dining table, staring at the grain in the wood, replaying every moment I'd ignored. Every instinct I'd buried for the sake of peace. I realized something then. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about disrespect disguised as ambition. And I don't forgive that easily. Instead of sleeping, I researched. Victor Hale wasn't difficult to find. His digital footprint was polished. Business articles, conference photos, interviews about ethical investing and family values. One detail stood out. He was married. Her name was Elena Hale. I stared at her photo longer than I should have. She looked composed, intelligent, the kind of woman who trusted deeply and loved fully, the kind of woman who deserved the truth. By the time dawn broke, I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused, because if my wife thought this was just business, then she had no idea how personal it was about to become. I didn't rush the next move. That's what people expect when emotions are involved. Rash decisions, late-night confrontations, accusations thrown like broken glass. I did the opposite. I tightened my routine instead. The morning after Vanessa mentioned the important meeting, I woke earlier than usual, ran longer, let the cold air burn clarity into my lungs. At work, I functioned like nothing had changed, answering emails, sitting through meetings, smiling when required. On the surface, I was the same dependable Adrian Carter. Inside, something had shifted. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was observing. Vanessa spent the day unusually attentive. She texted more than usual, asked how my morning was, sent a photo of her lunch with a caption about fueling up for a big evening. It felt performative, like she was laying down proof in advance. I responded politely, briefly, no emotion. That evening, she dressed with extra care. Different makeup, a dress she hadn't worn for me in years. When she stepped into the living room, she watched my face closely, waiting for something: jealousy, concern, reassurance. "You okay?" she asked, slipping on her heels. "Of course," I said. "You've worked hard for this." She smiled, relieved. That smile lingered in the air long after the door closed behind her. I waited 10 minutes before leaving. The rooftop lounge sat above a boutique hotel downtown, the kind of place where ambition and indulgence pretended to be networking. I didn't arrive like a suspicious husband. I arrived like a man who belonged there. Calm stride, neutral expression, purpose without urgency. From across the room, I saw them. Vanessa and Victor sat close, but not too close. Their posture told a practiced story, familiarity without exposure. His hand rested casually on the table near hers, never quite touching. She laughed softly, leaning in just enough to feel chosen. Victor Hale looked exactly like his online presence suggested: controlled, confident, aware of how people saw him. He spoke with his hands, slow and deliberate, like every word had been tested for impact. What surprised me wasn't seeing them together. It was realizing how little pain I felt watching. I took a seat at the bar, ordered coffee, and let the scene play out in my peripheral vision. A few minutes later, I noticed the woman seated 2 tables away from them. Elena Hale. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't angry either. She was observing, eyes steady, posture composed. She watched her husband with the quiet attentiveness of someone who knew him well. Too well. That's when I understood. This wasn't the first time she questioned something. I didn't approach her immediately. Timing mattered. I waited until Victor excused himself, phone pressed to his ear, stepping toward the edge of the rooftop. That's when I stood. "Elena Hale," I said gently, stopping a respectful distance from her table. She looked up, surprised but not alarmed. "Yes. My name is Adrian," I said. "I believe we should talk." Her gaze flicked instinctively toward Vanessa's table, then back to me. "About what?" "About honesty," I replied, "and the people who assume we won't compare notes." There was a pause, long enough for the music to swell between us. Then she gestured to the empty chair. "Sit," she said. "We didn't start with accusations. We started with coffee." I told her who I was, not emotionally, just factually. How long I'd been married. What my wife did for work. The name Victor Hale had been dropping into our home for months. Elena listened without interrupting, fingers wrapped tightly around her mug. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. "I was hoping I was wrong," she said quietly. "But I stopped believing that weeks ago." She told me about the late dinners, the vague explanations, the way Victor suddenly guarded his phone like a secret he carried everywhere. She admitted she'd come to the rooftop tonight uninvited, telling him she was meeting a friend downstairs. "I wanted to see," she said. "Not confront. Just see." Across the rooftop, Vanessa laughed again, this time louder. Elena followed my gaze. Her jaw tightened, not with rage, but resolve. "They think this is control," she said. "They think they're choosing the narrative." I nodded. "They always do." Victor returned to the table. Vanessa leaned closer, unaware that 2 people had just rewritten the night's meaning. Elena stood first. "We won't make a scene," she said. "Not yet." "No," I agreed. "We let them finish their performance." She met my eyes. And then, I said calmly, "We take everything they thought was secure and remove it." For the first time that night, Elena smiled. Not because she was happy, because she finally felt prepared. And as I watched my wife toast to new beginnings, I understood something clearly. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about consequence. Revenge doesn't begin with destruction. It begins with alignment. Elena and I didn't exchange numbers like co-conspirators. We exchanged context, facts, timelines, the kind of information that only becomes dangerous when placed in the right hands. That night ended quietly. No confrontation, no raised voices, no dramatic exits. Vanessa returned home later than usual, moving softly as if silence could erase guilt. I pretended to be asleep. The days that followed felt surreal. Vanessa was suddenly affectionate again, as if intimacy could reset suspicion. She cooked dinner, asked about my meetings, slipped her hand into mine while watching television. The performance was convincing enough that, months earlier, I might have believed it. Now, I recognized it for what it was: maintenance. Victor, according to Elena, had started making promises. Not emotional ones, strategic ones. He talked about pulling strings, accelerating Vanessa's access to capital, placing her in rooms she'd never enter on her own. He framed himself as indispensable. That was his mistake, because the more power someone claims to have, the more damage they sustain when it's exposed as illusion. Elena worked in corporate compliance. Quiet role. Invisible influence. She knew how money moved, how contracts hid intent behind legal language, how reputations were built on trust rather than truth. She didn't confront Victor. She audited him. Meanwhile, I adjusted my own life in ways Vanessa didn't notice at first. I volunteered for a cross-department project that dealt directly with vendor oversight. I reached out to former colleagues, people I'd helped years ago, favors repaid quietly. No pressure, just conversations. Patterns emerged quickly. Victor Hale wasn't just mentoring startups. He was positioning himself between founders and capital, collecting leverage disguised as opportunity. He blurred lines professionally, then relied on silence to protect him personally. Vanessa believed she was chosen. She didn't realize she was categorized. The emotional distance between us widened, but she mistook it for understanding. I stopped questioning her schedule entirely. That made her bold. She started staying out later, dressing differently, speaking about Victor with admiration she no longer tried to hide. "I've never met anyone like him," she said one evening, swirling wine in her glass. "He just sees potential." I smiled faintly. That's rare. She didn't catch the tone. She rarely did anymore. Behind the scenes, Elena and I compared findings over early morning coffee at different cafes around the city. Never the same place twice. Never for long. What started as shared suspicion hardened into strategy. Victor was planning a major funding event, a rooftop presentation for a new venture he was backing heavily. Vanessa was set to present. This was her moment, according to her. The breakthrough she'd been chasing for years. Victor had also convinced her to transfer partial intellectual control to a shell company he managed. He called it temporary. She didn't read the fine print. Elena did. The documents weren't illegal, just predatory, designed to ensure Victor always landed on his feet, regardless of outcome. Elena uncovered something else too. Emails, messages, patterns that suggested Vanessa wasn't the only one. She wasn't even the first. That truth hurt more than either of us expected. I watched my wife rehearse her presentation at the dining table one night, passion burning in her eyes. She spoke about vision, innovation, disruption. I remember the woman who once planned weekend road trips with me, who measured success in shared moments, not applause. I wondered when ambition turned into permission. The night of the event arrived faster than expected. Vanessa left early, glowing with confidence. She didn't kiss me goodbye, just a quick touch on the arm, like I was already a memory. I arrived separately. Elena arrived last. The rooftop was packed, investors, press, industry leaders. Victor moved through the crowd like a host, charismatic and composed. Vanessa stood beside him, radiant and unaware. When the presentation began, everything went according to plan. At first, Vanessa spoke flawlessly. The room listened. Heads nodded. Interest sparked. She was good, exceptionally good. For a moment, even I felt proud. Then Elena stood. She didn't interrupt. She didn't shout. She waited until the applause faded and the room settled. "I have a question regarding ownership structure," she said clearly. Victor froze for half a second. That half second was enough. Elena continued, projecting calm authority. She referenced documents, timelines, compliance issues. She asked why intellectual property had been rerouted through Victor's firm without full disclosure. She asked why similar structures appeared in 3 other startups. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Victor attempted to redirect. Elena didn't let him. That's when I stepped forward. I didn't speak emotionally. I spoke factually. I explained how conflict of interest disclosures had been omitted, how personal relationships blurred professional boundaries, how trust had been weaponized. Vanessa turned toward me, confusion flashing across her face. Then recognition. Her expression cracked, not in guilt, but fear. Victor tried to regain control, but the room had shifted. Investors don't panic easily, but they retreat quickly when credibility falters. Questions followed. Pressure mounted. By the end of the night, The event was suspended. Conversations moved into hushed corners. Victor stood isolated, his confidence draining visibly. Vanessa approached me, her voice trembling. "You planned this," she whispered. I looked at her calmly. "You planned this first." She searched my face for anger, for regret, for something she could argue against. She found none. As security began escorting guests out, Elena stood beside me. Not triumphant, just steady. "This isn't the end," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "It's the truth finally catching up." And as Vanessa walked away into the night, alone and exposed, I realized something important. Revenge isn't about humiliation. It's about clarity, and clarity leaves no room to hide. The fallout didn't arrive with explosions or headlines. It came in quieter forms, emails unanswered, meetings canceled, doors closing without explanation. That's how reputations actually end. Not loudly, permanently. Vanessa didn't come home that night. I didn't ask where she was. By morning, my phone buzzed with a message from her that felt unfamiliar, like it had been written by someone already standing outside their own life. She said she needed space. She said everything had moved too fast. She said she hadn't meant for things to happen the way they did. I read it once. Then I deleted it. The truth didn't need interpretation anymore. Victor Hale's name disappeared quickly. Funding partners distanced themselves. Advisory boards paused relationships, pending review. Investors don't wait for verdicts. They calculate risk and move on. Within a week, the shell company Elena had flagged was under formal scrutiny. Within 2, Victor resigned from the firm he'd built his reputation on. Elena filed for separation quietly. No drama. No statements. Just resolve. She didn't ask me how I felt about it. She didn't need to. We both understood that some endings don't require permission. Vanessa tried to talk to me 3 days later. She stood in the doorway of our living room, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, confidence stripped away. She spoke about pressure, about how Victor made her feel seen, about how she convinced herself she was doing this for our future. I let her finish. Then I told her something she didn't expect. "I believe you," I said. She blinked. "You do. I believe you wanted more," I replied calmly. "I just wasn't part of that plan." There was nothing left to argue. No misunderstanding to resolve. The betrayal hadn't been physical alone. It had been strategic. Intentional. Repeated. Vanessa moved out the following weekend. No shouting. No accusations. Just boxes and silence. Our marriage ended the same way it unraveled. Quietly. In the weeks that followed, I focused inward. I adjusted my routine again, not as armor this time, but as structure. I ran slower, slept longer, cooked meals I used to skip. I reconnected with friends I neglected, not to explain, just to exist outside the story that had consumed me. Elena and I met one final time, weeks later for coffee. She looked lighter, not happy, honest. We didn't talk about Victor. We talked about what comes after trust breaks and reforms itself differently. "People think revenge is about winning," she said, stirring her drink. "But it's really about reclaiming your sense of self." I nodded, and realizing you don't need to be chosen to be whole. We parted without promises, without attachment, just mutual respect forged in fire. Months passed. I heard Vanessa took a consulting role out of state. No investors, no shortcuts, just rebuilding. I hoped she found whatever she'd been chasing, but far away from me. As for Victor, his name faded entirely. No grand comeback, no redemption arc, just a lesson written in silence. One evening, standing on my balcony, watching the city glow below, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not because I'd exposed them, not because I'd won, but because I'd refused to become bitter. I'd chosen clarity over chaos, discipline over drama, growth over resentment. Some people lose everything because they believe control is the same as power. They're wrong. Power is knowing when to let go, and when to stand still long enough for the truth to arrive on its own. And when it does, you don't need to chase it. It finds you.